Welcome, everyone. Let's dive into this intriguing geopolitical perspective. Jeffrey Sachs suggests that Europe's push for a ceasefire in Ukraine may not be as benevolent as it seems.
Yeah, interesting take. So Sachs is basically arguing that there's a strategic motive underlying these ceasefire calls, right?
Exactly. It's like on the surface it sounds like peace, but there's a hidden agenda aimed at benefiting Russia.
That's a bold claim. And he ties this idea to the recent high-level discussions like the talks between the US and Russian presidents in Alaska, correct?
Right, he points out that these comments came just a day after that Alaska summit, which adds an additional layer to the whole narrative. So you have this timing that seems a little too convenient, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, timing is always key in geopolitics. I'm curious though, is Sachs suggesting that Europe is deliberately stalling or creating a scenario where a ceasefire is used to strategically empower Putin?
Precisely. He argues that the ceasefire demand might be a kind of power play, one that could weaken Ukraine's position by essentially giving Russia room to maneuver.
Yep, that makes sense in a way. Now, isn't that a pretty controversial perspective, considering the humanitarian reasons behind calling for a ceasefire?
Absolutely. It's controversial. It's like saying, hold on, there might be a double game happening here. Sachs appears to be warning that this isn't solely about protecting civilians. It could be a calculated move designed to shift the balance of
Yeah,
power.
it's a bit of a curveball, isn't it? And he even alerts President Trump about this potential plot. It seems like Sachs is trying to bring a US perspective into the mix too.
Yes, indeed. By alerting Trump, Sachs is essentially saying that the US should be wary of this maneuver. It's a signal that these maneuvers in Ukraine are interconnected with the broader US-Russia
It really
dynamics.
ties the international pieces together, doesn't it? Right? And considering that this comes from Times of India, the global audience definitely gets a broader view on these actions.
Absolutely. It's also interesting to note the timing. This all came right after that significant Alaska meeting, which itself was a battleground for US-Russian negotiation narratives.
Yeah, timing again really is everything here. I gotta ask though, do you think Sachs might be overstating the strategic implications? I mean, maybe Europe is actually pro-Ukraine in its heart.
That's a good point. There's definitely room for debate here. While Sachs champions the idea of a hidden agenda, one could argue that Europe's stance is primarily rooted in a desire for peace, especially given the suffering caused by the conflict.
Right, but then again, strategic interests often blend with humanitarian reasons. Exactly. There's always that messy mix. Now, how do you think this aligns with what we know about international diplomacy? When do humanitarian motives slide into strategic maneuvering?
Well, it's like a classic move in the political playbook. Nations often cloak strategic ambitions in humanitarian language to make it more palatable. In this case, Sachs seems to be highlighting that possibility, suggesting that Europe might be leveraging this ceasefire demand to indirectly benefit Russia's position.
It's a bit like sugarcoating a bitter pill. And isn't it fascinating how these narratives shift depending on who's telling the story? For instance, while Sachs lays it out as a deliberate plot, others might simply see it as an opportunity to end the conflict.
Exactly. And that's what makes the geopolitical landscape so complex. There's a constant tension between, on one hand, the noble aim of reducing hostilities, and on the other, the underlying power plays that can emerge. It's like, on one level you have the moral high ground, and on another, raw political interests.
Yeah, that's the crux of it. So, in essence, Sachs is really challenging the conventional narrative here, right? He's basically hinting that what we see might not be the full story, and that trusted alliances and motives might be more tangled than they appear.
Absolutely. There's a twist in the tale. And given that these discussions are happening on international stages, where every statement is scrutinized, it makes his assertions even more impactful.
It's a real geopolitical chess match. Speaking of chess matches, the Alaska meeting itself sounds like a high-stakes move. Do you think the location and timing were more than just coincidental?
Oh, definitely. Alaska as a venue brings its own symbolism with vast, harsh landscapes, almost hinting at the tough negotiations that lie ahead. It's like, setting the stage for a battle of wits under extreme conditions.
Yep, that imagery really sticks with you. And then there's the impact this narrative has on, say, the public opinion in Europe and the US. If listeners start connecting these dots, could it influence diplomatic relationships?
Definitely, it could. If people begin to believe that there's a hidden strategic motive behind the ceasefire calls, it might lead to increased skepticism about the intentions of European leaders. And that kind of tension could ripple across transatlantic relations.
Uh huh. Public trust is like really sensitive to these kinds of revelations. Now, one thing I feel is that Sachs's perspective might also reflect his own economic and political biases. Would you agree that his viewpoints sometimes mix economic theory with political commentary?
That's a fair critique. Sachs is known for his outspoken economic critiques, and his observations often come loaded with his own philosophical take on global economics. So while his points are compelling, they might be colored by his broader agenda.
Yeah, personal bias can subtly influence these high level takes. And then, there's the whole media framing aspect too. The Times of India presenting this narrative gives it a global viewpoint, but might also mirror regional concerns.
Right, and it's interesting how media outlets around the world pick up on these angles, further fueling the debates online and among policymakers. It's almost like the narrative is amplified through various channels.
The snowball effect in media is really powerful here. So, if we wrap it up, Sachs' claims about Europe's ceasefire ploy are not just about Ukraine, but are indicative of the broader power dynamics at play between Europe, the US, and Russia, right?
Exactly. It's a snapshot of the intricate dance of diplomacy in today's world. A move that appears to be about peace might actually be echoing deeper, more strategic interests, especially when seen in the light of these high-stakes meetings in places like Alaska.
Yeah, it really makes you think about the underlying orchestration in global politics. It's like every decision is layered with multiple intentions, and sometimes the most obvious one isn't the whole truth.
Precisely. And that, in a nutshell, is what makes this discussion so captivating. Behind every apparent push for peace, there's often a labyrinth of strategy and counter-strategy playing out on the world stage.
Right on. It's a real blend of idealism and cold strategy. Well, this definitely gives us a lot to chew on. I mean, if Sachs is right, then maybe we need to look at these calls for ceasefire with a more critical eye.
Exactly. And it challenges policymakers and even the general public to question what's really going on behind these moves. It's a call to peel back the layers and examine the true motives in international relations.
And that's a discussion we're always going to need to have. In any case, this perspective definitely stokes the fire of debate, especially with such influential figures in the mix, like Trump being alerted. It makes one wonder what the next move will be.
Absolutely. It's like watching a high-stakes chess game where every move has potentially global consequences. And while we may not have all the answers, discussions like these push us to look deeper into the geopolitical narratives swirling around us.
Yeah, it's both exciting and a bit unnerving how interconnected everything is. And that, in the end, is what keeps the conversation and the strategy alive.
Indeed. Thanks for jumping into this complex yet fascinating discussion. It's a reminder that in international relations, nothing is ever just black and white.
Agreed. And that's all for our deep dive into this provocative narrative. Until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and stay engaged with the complexities of global politics.